thought-provoking podcast that sheds light on the challenges faced by young people living in urban areas. We highlight the resilience and creativity of young leaders who are finding innovative ways to overcome the challenges our young people are facing, inspiring listeners to take action to support them. This is A Different Cloth.
Hey, yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season number 3, episode number 3. My name is Jose Rodriguez. I am one of the hosts, and I got my guy, Angel Maldonado, with me, all the way from New York.
The way you said it. I just got here from New York.
Just got here, like last week. And welcome back, bro.
Yeah, no, I know, like, I've been hearing, like, everybody kind of, like, DM us and write us, like, yo, bring the other guy back. Like, so I was like, all right, well, I'm here. You know,
He's back by popular demand. And no, excited. We did have a good 2 conversations with Pablo and just all around. Hey, what does it look like, man, to just create a space in your heart that's good ground for all that you are wanting, asking, expecting God to do. And that was really powerful. We talked about offense, and then we talked about letting things go and being able to remove, the extra baggage out of our lives. And man, today we're going to talk about planting seeds, and I'm really, really excited about that. I know in one of our conversations we were talking about Johnny Appleseed, and I think it came up somehow. We didn't talk about him, but it came up that how many seeds he planted for the sake of this like massive harvest. And so I want to ask you the question: who first planted the seed in Angel? To for the life you're living, if there was an outside voice, an outside perspective, somebody that came in, the harvest you're living out right now, who was the first person that planted that seed?
outside meaning, like, not family?
It could be a family member. Just who was the first person that planted that seed?
I think my dad, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think my dad, just because I think at a very young age, I was able to, like, identify how much of a, like, detailed person he was, or how, I guess I'm very detailed, right? I'm very analytical. I need time to process things, like, so I was able to literally sit and examine him so much, and just how he navigated conversations with people and how he poured into people, and then how he treated his wife, my mother, obviously, and just like how he was with my brother, and then how he was with me. It wasn't like, it was very intricate, and I think it was like the fundamentals of like how I wanted to kind of like start my foundation.
Yeah, it's great.
I would say that for sure.
Did you start living that out right away?
Oh, no. No way.
Yeah.
No way.
And so how many years ago was it that you felt like, okay, that seed was sown versus we're in 2024?
You know what's
now?
crazy? I feel like it's still being sown. You know what I mean? I think it's been this like dragged out thing.
Okay.
Not dragged out as in bad, but I feel like the different stages in my life, I then go back to something. It's almost like reading a book. You read it the first time, you get this whole new idea of reading it, right? You read it the second time, it's like you catch that second thing that you didn't realize the first time. And then the more you read it, it's just the more like you just see things in different ways. So I think like when I had my kids, I was able to now revisit all those things that shaped me into like a good teenager. Now it's shaping me into a good father. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely still like, and I could now, interesting enough, like I'm not trying to fast forward, I could see the seeds that he planted now in my kids. For sure.
No, I think that's a big part of the conversation, right? You throw a rock into a lake, and there's the one initial wave, but then there's this ripple effect that's literally going to just move throughout the entire body of water. And it's like never ends, right? And it's one after the other, after the other, after the other. And that to me is what those, like, planting those seeds are all about. It's like, hey, what type of ripple do I want to leave here? And we may never be able to guess, tell, or even understand the type of impact that each ripple will have, right? You just trust that if I throw the rock in, there's gonna be a ripple effect. And so I just think that's an important concept. And like, you're right, what your dad sowed into you, you're now sowing, not even just to your own kids, to the kids you served, and to like so many other people. So I just think that's really important.
Yeah. And also, like, the bad as well. You know what I mean?
That part.
Like whether it's habits or whether it's like things that I struggle with, like forgiveness or like I want to say like not necessarily intimacy, but like the going deeper with people. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like those type of things. And it's just because I mean, I don't know if it was like my dad's thing, but I feel like there was so much I didn't get to learn because obviously like his life was cut short. So it's like, oh man, I have all these things that like formed, and now it's almost like I've also taken the seeds from like my mom. Not saying that my mom is bad, but it's like a clear example of like, okay, I had to shift who I was now learning from.
Yeah.
And it was almost like, oh, I have to now learn things differently. So, yeah.
Yeah, that idea, like, I mean, we're constantly sowing seeds.
Yeah.
Good, bad, and ugly, right? Like, and the unfortunate part of that is people probably feel and remember our bad seeds more than the good ones sometimes, right? It's like when a leader makes a mistake and how it's so hard to forget that. It's so hard to forget what the person did, and it's so hard. And it's like, oh, I'll go here with this, right? Not all, but a lot of church hurt actually comes from a leader just making a mistake. Now, some is habitual people that's just like bad leadership, right?
Sure.
But not all of it. Not all. Some of it is there was a mistake that was made. It generated this pain that now is playing out this whole ripple effect, and it's affecting so many other people, which goes back to that thought of we're constantly, always sowing, investing seeds all around us. And my thought is this, that, you know, we love to think that people will only take the good side of us.
Right.
But you actually will always produce who you are, not what you say.
Okay.
Right? And so, like, so much of, like, your people will follow what you do. And my parents used to say this all the time. It used to irritate me, but do what I say, not what I do.
Yeah.
And the first thing I found myself doing was what they do.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I started acting just like them. Because it's just not a reality. You produce or reproduce rather who you are,
Yeah.
which is why I think we got to take an account of what type of seeds am I sowing on an everyday basis. That's a hard question.
Yeah, you know, when I used to work in juvie, there was this one kid. He was about 14 years old, and he got locked up for selling some stuff, right? And interesting enough, when I went to go
By stuff, you mean candy.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I got you.
For the basketball team. No, he had gotten locked up, right? Interesting enough, his brother was also in the same jail. So his brother was a lot older, and then he had a younger brother who was out. But then their father, I'm going somewhere with this, their father was upstate, right? So I think the youngest one, he was so closed off. So I started talking to the older one, and the story he told me was my dad didn't know how to do anything but sell drugs to provide. And when he went away, we had nothing. So I had to sell drugs to provide.
Yeah.
And then when he went away, the other younger brother had to sell drugs to provide. So it was almost like, how did it get this bad this fast?
Yeah.
But that ripple effect of like, this is all we know, all we knew. And now like there's a younger brother that's out, and now they're like, it's interesting because the dad coaches the older son and says, don't follow in my footsteps, but all he saw was how to get it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then the younger brother, like, all he saw was how to get it. You know, so that's also like for me, like the hard part of like, man, you can also truly do some damage if you don't, you know, I think take into account not only your moves, but like who is also watching.
Yeah.
You know? So.
Yeah. No, that's good. I was thinking as you were talking about that type of a chain reaction and the generational impact that has, and like what stops that? What would it take for something to cut that situation so the youngest brother doesn't end up doing the same thing, which it sounds like he would be on the same.
Yeah.
He's up next, right? Like,
Yeah.
what in your opinion, from your view, your perspective, what do you think it is that stops those particular ripples? Or let's not even. Yes, this you can use that as a framework, but also you mentioned like the unforgiveness piece, whatever those situations are that we tend to like produce around us. What stops those ripples?
We going practical here?
You go wherever you want to go.
Yeah.
You said Jesus, huh? You said Jesus stops it.
yeah. No, I mean, for me, definitely Jesus, for sure.
Holy Ghost.
But I think this is like a direct definition or a direct sign of like, okay, I think this is a direct sign of the church not being infiltrated in the community. And infiltrated, it sounds such like a crazy word.
Yeah, people don't like that word.
But the reality is, like, there was a Tyler Perry movie. Don't ask me which one. There was a Tyler Perry movie. Don't ask me which one.
Where we're going with this.
But everyone in the church knew this one lady's business. You know what I mean? But then at the end of the movie, it was the church that literally came to this lady's aid. You know what I mean? And the interesting part that I took from that movie was like, man, like, us as a church, do we actually know the stories that are in our community? Do we actually know that this man got locked up and now he left behind 3 boys? You know what I mean? Like, because if we knew that, would that even set us off to be like, hey, they may not have somebody. Let me just see what they need.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, do we care enough to know stories of the people in our community? So, for example, like even now, just because, and Philip will tell you this too, right? Just because we heard the older brother say it, now it's our responsibility. We don't do outside ministry, but now it's our responsibility to make sure that youngest one doesn't also show up in here.
Yeah, wow.
You know what I mean?
Wow.
Where does he live? All right, we're gonna go see him.
Yeah.
And then just set him up with somebody who can walk with him. You know?
Yeah. Woo, there's a lot in what you just said, but I'm thinking about.
So the church. Let me say.
Yeah, well, I mean, seriously, I'm thinking about, man, the amount of outreach that I've done. Let me not just say the church that I've done.
Yeah.
For the sake of doing outreach, and getting okay, I did it, and I did the outreach, as opposed to hearing the stories and sitting with the people and learning how they got there, and I also think of like. Any average person hearing these stories of these young kids doing drugs, and their initial perception is, well, you're a bad kid. You're doing this, and you don't think of what got this kid there in the first place, the backstory that contributed to everything that they're doing right now. And I don't have the practical side of this, but I have this image of what stops a ripple. Sure. And I would say nothing stops a ripple like another splash. So if you think about it, when you throw a rock in the water and it's rippling, the only thing that would stop the ripple is when you throw another rock in the water. And now there's a different ripple that's created, and it's going in a different direction, and it will make the water go a whole different movement will happen. And I think to what you're saying about the church and what we can do and should do, and leaders and the people that are listening to the spot and anything else, is that we got to be willing to be that other splash, the other ripple, the other part of that story that's going to push the narrative the other direction, because there can be another direction, and we got to see that and know that, but we got to be willing to do that. Yeah,
and hear me when I say I'm not trying to beat up on the church, right? But I think we've allowed ourselves to use the excuse of like, oh, we can't save the world, or we can't reach everyone, as like a crutch to say. Almost like a crutch of saying like, yeah, I just can't get to everybody. And it's almost like you rather say that than actually like possibly trying now. In whichever capacity you can try. It's almost like the ownership piece. Like in your church, in your area, in your world, where can you take ownership in what's in front of you? You know what I mean? So
yeah, it's funny because it takes me to a theological conversation around the elect. And how sometimes, I know it's like, ooh, sometimes that's how we treat outreaches, right? It's like, oh, are only going after a few, or we'll only go after the ones that want it or receive it. When our reality, I think, and something I say here at RAG all the time when we're doing assemblies and things is like, yo, we're aiming for the masses, but we're looking for the one. Like, we want to feed the 5,000. We want to, share the gospel with everybody, but we're looking for that one story, that one impact, that one. And it doesn't mean we're dismissing the 5,000, because the aim was the 5,000. But in that 5,000, there's the one that'll arise. We were at a continuation school last week doing an assembly, and the coolest thing, honestly, it was so continuation schools. They're like, if there was ever a ripple going in the wrong direction, it's probably a lot of those students and their stories. And there was seeds that were sown from probably generations, and that it's just trickling out that way, right? And we we did our assembly, and there was this one young lady at the very end that came up, and she was so moved by us. She was like, honestly, that was like I don't even remember the word she said, but like that was like the best thing ever. She was like, that was just so inspiring, and like, and I just think like that's the approach. It's like, I don't only aim for the one, because if I only aim for the one, I may not even reach the one, right? I gotta aim for everybody, and as I'm aiming for everybody, now there's gonna be those that actually like get it. And so I just think that needs to be the heart of our approach to reaching or changing those narratives and those ripple effects. So
I got another story for you too.
Uh-oh.
So there's this pastor in Queens, in New York, and he did something very interesting. Like, I mean, his church, he has an insane story, but his church is essentially in the middle of the projects, right? And he did this thing where he realized that there were a lot of like families and couples and stuff in the neighborhood. So he offered to marry people for free and give the venue of the church for free.
Wow.
Right? You didn't have to be a member. You didn't have to go to the church. It was completely free. All you had to do was sign up, whatever. His only thing was like, do marriage counseling with me 5 times.
Facts.
Right?
I'm so glad you said that, because I was a little concerned about the story.
No, hold on. Let me get there. So he used those 5 times to just pour into that family. It was the way he set it up was like he would provide childcare for the kids while they were there, and gave them a meal while he just chatted with them about life.
Fire. Right?
And he did it 5 times. And I mean, in that, he was very detailed about like church and God and stuff like that. Years later, the husband, one of the husbands, he did it with a few people, but there was a specific family. The husband ends up getting locked up. He goes to jail. And the daughter, years later, she's now a teen. She was maybe like a preteen or whatever. She's now a teen, goes back to that church, right? Starts visiting. He didn't even know it was her. And they asked her like, oh, what made you come? And she was like, my dad and my mom got married here, and that was a good moment for me. And I wanted to go back to a good moment. And then she's been going ever since. He gets out of jail, gives his life to Christ, and now they all go to the church.
Wow. And
it's just that one little seed he planted literally went to the daughter, then back to the, you know what I mean? And it was just like, that's doing something with what God gave you, you know?
Yeah, like provide good moments for people.
Yeah.
Like just lean into, man, what can I do today to make a good moment for somebody at the gas station and my neighborhood, my neighbor, whatever, like, what could I do? And I love that story, because it wasn't that the mom and the dad started going to the church.
No.
It's that the daughter who experienced the seed back then is what made it all come full circle.
And the reality too is like, even from the opposite side of it, I could imagine being a pastor and marrying a bunch of people and no one coming to the church, and it's just like, why am I doing this? You know what I mean? But it's just like those moments, you know what I mean? Or like even hearing from the dad. I remember like he called the dad in jail, and they were talking, and he was saying stuff from the counseling. He was like, I just didn't listen. But I remember when you said whatever. And it was just like, again, you just don't really know. Like, you have to like words are valuable, and what you say, people hold to, you know?
Yeah. So. I have a thought and a frustration with this because I hear a story like that and I think, man, I would love to do that when I have the resources or when I'm ready to do that or when I have arrived to a certain place and a location to be able to do that. And it's a thought, but it's also a frustration because I see a lot of people who don't have much think that they can't make investments now. Right. And the challenge with that is that every rich person that I've ever heard of, thought of, at some level made an investment when they didn't have, that they are now living the fruit of. You know what I mean? In a real way. And so I think there's this poverty conversation that's playing out in my mind right now that one of the things that keeps people in this cycle of poverty is that I can only give when I have a sufficient amount, as opposed to if this is an investment and a seed now. Because one thing that we talked about is you won't see the harvest of the seed in the same season that you plant it.
Sure.
So I may have to plant it now, and I may not see the fruit of the seed.
Yeah, and be okay with it.
But I have to trust that the seed is going to produce a harvest. I think even here at RAG, we lost a lot of schools last year. Yeah. And that was like a whoa type thing. And instead of us like saying, oh shoot, let's withhold our resources. Let's and don't get me wrong, there's wisdom and stuff and you know, but like let's get tight and let's be scarce, right? My initial response to that was no, let's invest more in training. Yeah. Let's pour more into our team. Let's go deeper into what it is that we really say we do. Because I trust that the more seeds I sow when it feels tight, the more harvest I'll feel in another season coming. That's good. And it's just a conviction, but I get frustrated at poverty because poverty will convince people that you can't sow a seed when you don't have. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I don't know if you said it because that's actually how you felt or it was like a tee up to the conversation, but it's just like even me, like I wanted to combat what you said because you have the resources. Like when you say, oh, I don't even have the resources. Like, I mean, what was the resources that the guy had? He had time. We have time. Yeah. He had scripture. We have scripture. Yeah. And he had space. And if I'm like, you have time, you have scripture, and you have space. Yeah. You could marry people here tomorrow. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's just like, and I don't know if it was like you specifically, but I feel like I feel like sometimes we look at certain people, certain things, and we also we envision that we have to have this big thing or we have to be ready. It's like, no, like what would a smaller version of that look like with what you have? Like look at what you have and I can't bake a cake, but I could set the table really nicely, then be really good at that. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know. I just feel like I think the poverty mindset, I feel like sometimes it allows us to see what people have and say, I don't have. Facts. When it's almost like, man, you have something. You know what I mean? You have something. It's just like, well, would you say, is it harder to identify in the poverty mindset? Is it harder to identify what you have if you don't have the right people around you?
I don't know that it's about having the right people around you. I think it's harder to identify what you have the more you're looking at what other people have. Okay. Like, it's just period, right? The more I'm focused on what they're doing, what they have, I heard this, I reposted it in my stories last week. One of my former pastors from Oklahoma, his name is Paul Doherty. Shout out to him if he ever hears this. He's incredible. Their church is a mega church. They're doing amazing things. I got saved at that church. And he did an interview with Mike Todd. And they both got thrown into senior leadership at the same time. Both young. They're both about my age. So they're both like super young. Well, I'm not that young no more, but they're young. In
23, 24?
In the senior leadership conversation, they're young. And they're both like stepped into mega churches. Well, Transformation wasn't, I don't think, considered a mega church yet. But it was a thriving ministry. And Paul's honesty to Mike was so refreshing. He said, Mike, I saw your Instagram and you had 200 likes. And then one day I went back to your Instagram and you had 5,000 likes. And I was like, wait, what the heck is happening? Yeah. And he said, I could not help. My heart started racing. I started to feel some type of way. And literally said for a good period of time, I was jealous because I was only looking at what you had.
Yeah.
And here I am, a mega church pastor at a thriving church in Tulsa and doing really well. I can't even see the abundance that I'm sitting on because all I'm focused on is you're going viral. And so I think the poverty thing is most happening. It's happening the most when I am more consumed with what other people have instead of looking at what's in my hands currently. Yeah. And how can I take what's in my hands and invest it? Which takes me to this next part of the conversation that I want to have. Because I was thinking about, to your example, which I think was a great example. We can marry people here. We got an office space. We got things. We can bring the lights and the microphones and the cameras. And we could do the full thing. But what about money? Because I think that's where things get real uptight, and I want to have the conversation because we're not a church.
You don't need money. You don't need money. What do you need money for?
Because I think that's where people are afraid to invest.
Okay.
It's a financial investment people are afraid to do. I think if I can invest my time, I would. I think for the most, if you ask me, bro, to like help somebody out with my time, I'm I'm in. I got you. You need my energy. You need my muscles. Whatever. I could do that. You need my money. Whoa.
Okay, where's their money here?
No, I'm not saying
okay. I was gonna go with it.
No, I'm just talking about in general.
Yeah.
When you're asking people to invest their gifts, their talents, their things, like that's a little bit of an easier ask.
Yeah.
Then what about you investing your money?
Hey, check this out. Okay. So this is gonna be extremely vulnerable.
Uh-oh.
When I was doing stuff I wasn't supposed to. I remember giving a lot of it away, and I remember I kept $500, and with that $500, I started what you call the Music in the Air Foundation. It was my very first nonprofit, right? I spent 5 years with that organization. I wasted 5 years of my own money because I didn't know about business. I didn't know about nonprofits. All I knew how to do was do ministry. And I was really good at it, right? And I remember to the point where I had a 40 hours a week job. It went to 80 because I would just take all the overtime I could, and that extra 40, I threw it straight into the nonprofit. I did some horrible things. I don't even know if it was whatever. Anyway, but the reality was I spent so much money, right? And I can't tell you a single person that I've helped that whole time. I've probably helped a lot of people, right? Or served a lot of people, or whatever the case is. But the point is, if it wasn't all those years of just giving, right? Without I knew I was bad at business, but I didn't care. I wanted to give. And I think when you give, I think the Lord sets you up in positions to give more later on. And this is why I say it, because I didn't care about the money. I was getting married, and I was throwing money away. We would do events, and I would spend $5,000 on an event, and I saw no return. And my wife would be like, "Hey, fam, this is crazy." But the reality was, if I didn't put time in and invest, not only on that, but I developed an insane skill, and I would even say I would not be at RAG if I didn't do that. For me, that was the investment out of it, for sure.
Yeah.
Because it's that would have never gave me YFC, and YFC would have never gave me this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and it's just I feel sometimes we harbor on money too much, and we just bro, just go for it. I think sometimes, I get into conversations with people and they're like, "Oh, if I just can frame it this way." I'm like, all right, but what about those stories where people don't have much, but they just have a story, and then it just catches on. Don't tell me. I think you need money for stuff, but I think if you focus on it, you won't get it. And I think if you can focus on something else, the money will come. And we keep talking about money, but honestly, it's really provision is what we need. And when we can worry about God providing provision for what God is trying to do in us, then we don't have to worry about money.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have no rebuttal to that. Just to be clear, I fully agree with everything that you just said. And to me, what it feels like is the more I sow into others, the more somehow God in all of His goodness and faithfulness will find a way to get that back to me.
Not only that, like also like I had a burden. And it didn't. My money situation didn't stop me from like working towards the burden that God gave me for the community.
Oh, I'm with you on that.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And it's just like the face-off part. Like, you know what I mean? I'm jumping weeks ahead, but like, you got to make a decision. Like, do you,
Yeah.
you know, is it, yeah. Go ahead.
What we did in the beginning of RAG, because we had nothing, was as if we had everything, because it wasn't about the money. It was like, man, we want to serve the kids the best way that we possibly can.
Yeah.
And so when we started to talk big numbers and contracts and stuff like that, it was like almost shocking to me, because it was never a money conversation. It was like, whoa, like, hey, we can get that, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it was one of those like, oh man, that's just gonna add value to the work that we're already doing.
Right.
So I agree that you don't need money to do what God may be calling you to do right now.
Sure.
But I think my one pushback to the money conversation is this, and yes, we talk a lot about money. We don't. I don't think we do. Do we?
Here?
Yeah.
No.
No, not at all. No. Right? I was like, money's not typically our conversation.
No.
But the reason I want to press the money, because to me it's a parable of the sower of the seeds, right, or the talents. Those are the money conversations that I think of, right? It's like what happens when people do get a little bit of money,
Yeah.
and how they handle or steward that money, where most people take it and consume it.
Yeah.
Through Starbucks, through McDonald's, through wherever else you choose to eat. You feel like I was yelling at them right now. But through whatever, right? And so that money is not sown, it's consumed. And so we eat the seed, and so there's no harvest because we ate it.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? So that's what I'm referencing is like, man, when I think, man, what would break the poverty of cycle over somebody's life? Their willingness to invest money. And you can invest it in whatever your education.
Yeah.
I can invest it in church, and I believe that's an important thing. And
yeah.
I believe in the tithe and all of that. And we're not a church, so this is not advocating for that. But what breaks the stronghold that poverty has over me is my willingness to be generous and to let go and not frivolously and not like everybody gets, because I'm not saying that, but strategic seed. Knowing that there will be a harvest. Right. And the misconception of harvest in a lot of people's life is I expect the harvest to come back the same way I sowed the seed. So I gave $20, so I'm expecting $50 to come back to me.
Yeah.
But the harvest of the 20 may actually be in a new relationship that opens up a new job opportunity.
Right.
It may be in an entrepreneurship idea that comes that now I'm living out this harvest idea, when all reality what opened up that was my willingness to just sow the seed.
Yeah.
And to me, that's where I get a little like frustrated, is because these are principles that really, really successful people understand and live out. It's why they're so willing to give up some of their stuff and still live, frugal in some ways, and like, not be frivolous with their spending or whatever. Just be good stewards of their resources. But the more they invest, that's why people will pay $80,000 for a coach.
Yeah.
Because the more I'll invest in the coach, the more money I'm going to be able to make on the other side of this.
Of course.
And so that's kind of where I was going with this. Is like, I think people have to have a willingness to actually sow. And I'm ready for the preach of the 2024. You got to sow into where you're trying to go.
Yeah.
And I just believe that. And I hate that it sounds like that, but it's a real thing. It's like,
got to sow to go.
And I just remember, bro, like I have invested in people and places that I'm like, I'll give a very practical example, and we don't ever talk about anything we've given here. But I remember when I had the sense that God was opening up LA County to us. Okay. This was before any opportunities were on the table. There was no school conversation. I just had a thought. And I had a friend in LA County that was doing some good work out there. And I took some money and I invested it out of RAG, because I wanted to sow into the place that I felt like God was drawing us into.
Yeah.
Now, a year later, we're in a conversation in LA County and multiple conversations that are going to open up a harvest
Yeah.
that's much bigger than what I ever sowed in the first place.
Sure.
So that's kind of what I'm referencing as far as those seeds and the harvest is like, man, there has to be a resource conversation here.
So honest question, how many times within that season, you said a year period?
Oh, it's longer than a year.
Okay. How many times, honestly speaking, within that longer than a year, did you say, I made a mistake, or like, man, this ain't gonna work out, or like, man, what did I just do? Especially like holding, like, not only your livelihood in your hand, but the livelihood of a lot of people in your hand.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how many times was that like, oh, I'm about to beat up on myself right now?
A lot. And I'll tell you where that conversation came from more than ever. And it was less about like what we had or what we didn't have here. And it was more about how I felt those resources were stewarded. And like, I didn't do it for the sake of the relationship that I had. I did it because of where I felt like we were supposed to go. And I was obedient to that. But I was also disappointed when the relationship that I had wasn't as fruitful as I thought. And so that's why I'm referencing, I didn't sow into a school district there. I didn't sow into a school. I sowed in a different area, a different place, and questioned the seed multiple times afterwards. When all of a sudden we get these emails and phone calls from LA County schools, and they're like, hey, we heard about you.
Yeah.
Would you be open and willing to come? And I can point that back to a season where I was obedient to sow, even when well after that I got frustrated. What
made you stay committed to the seed?
Well, number one, it was
obedient to it.
Well, it was gone, so there ain't much you can do now. Just believe the Lord for the best. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I think like committed to the seed, I'm not committed to the seed as much as I'm committed to the process.
Okay.
Of seed time and harvest.
Yeah.
That scripture makes it clear that as long as the earth exists, there will be seed time and harvest.
Yeah.
And seed time, harvest.
Yeah.
It's never seed harvest. Seed time, harvest. That process I'm committed to.
Yeah. It's interesting because you talk about seed time and harvest. Like, I feel like I'm in the time transition right now.
It's a sucky place to be, bro.
No. Okay, so this is how my brain works, right? I feel like all of 2023 was a lot of seed, and I think like even the church that I was visiting for that entire year, like the Way Family Church, it allowed me to see things very differently, and I think it brought me back to like the rock steady, the fundamentals of like of just like the core of like God and me and in my family and stuff like that. And I think, long story short, this is where I'm taking it, right? Now I see, I've always told you personally, like, I don't ever want to speak again, right? Because of what has happened to me, you know what I mean? That person I was, right? But there came a point, that face-off moment where I say like, man, I cannot run from this anymore, right? So it's almost like my time version is almost like, okay, all right, how do I do this right now? How do I do this the best way, right? And not necessarily for, there was this, I recently joined a Zoom where a gentleman was, if you want to say who the person was, you can, but I recently joined a Zoom where the gentleman was teaching people on possibly like how to speak or how to like structure speaking and stuff like that. And for me, it was very informative and very necessary because, again, the burden of like, all right, well, if I have to speak, I want to make sure I do it correctly because it's almost like this seed, right? And what I'm about to plant right now isn't for me. It's for everybody else on the other end of my voice that needs to hear it correctly, who needs to hear it like in a way that's given at my best ability and stuff like that. And it's almost like I know, I don't want to say I know nothing's going to come back to me, but I'm not doing it in that. I'm sowing and I'm invested into it and learning this new way or this new method just because I know like it will be an investment for someone else for sure.
Yeah. Hands down, fully agree. When the focus is the harvest or the call or the people on the other side of my obedience, that's what makes it especially when there's a deep conviction to it, right?
Yeah.
That's what makes it worth it in the end. It's like, man, this is not about me. I'm not investing in myself.
Yeah.
Even though I could make a legitimate argument that the more you invest in yourself, the better you'll ever be for other people. So there's a legit thought there of like, well, how do I serve people better? I keep giving to people. Well, I could also flip that thought and say, well, I serve people better by investing in me so that I could be better for other people, right?
Yeah.
So what you're doing is right, because now there's going to be people that are going to listen to you on the other side of what you invested your time in, that's going to reap the harvest of whatever, because they're the goal.
Yeah.
The goal is reaching the people. It's doing the thing, right? And so that's extremely, extremely valuable. And honestly, that's one of those things that makes you want to sow those seeds.
Yeah.
The harder part is when you don't see people attached to it. Like for instance, I would just say this, even the seed I sowed in LA, that was a hard seed to sow. That wasn't as easy as like, oh, I'm just going to, there's other seeds I've sown that were really easy to sow because I could almost see where the harvest was going to come from.
Yeah.
There was no talk of harvest yet.
True.
There was no like, oh, it's just a blind seed almost. But to be living in the harvest now is like, I'm grateful that when I was challenged to do it, I was obedient. Because look, God's thoughts are not our thoughts, and his ways are not our ways. His harvest for us could look completely different than what we think harvest could look like.
Yeah.
Drastically different. And that's where that obedience conversation comes in of, would you be willing to sow a seed today? Would
Yeah.
you do it? And bro, with the work we do, the students we work with, we're sowing seeds on an every single day basis that we may not ever see a harvest in.
Yeah.
And we still trust that the more seeds I plant, the more ripples I create, the more fruit that we'll see.
That's good.
In the end.
If you're watching this, you can give at no I'm joking. I'll let you finish up, right? But there was this movie that I was watching. I don't remember the name of the movie, but essentially and which is so real. The gentleman, he had to create something, right? But he didn't create it for himself because he knew if he created it for himself, it would stop with him. He knew that he had a dream for a people, right? And he created something that I think it was like years, it was like in the era of Caesar. And he created like this machine or something that is manufactured in his way of doing it. In the development of that invention throughout the years, and I think it was like 2023 where you actually saw the fruits of it. The reality is that guy, his kids after, all of them are probably gone at this point. But it's almost like who's receiving the benefit of that is someone that's so far away from him.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, but he still had a dream for the people.
Yeah.
Or a dream for people and not just him.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you know your dream is good when it's just more than just you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right, man. There's generations to come that will be blessed by what we were willing to sow, envision, create in the season that we're currently in. I guess I would end it with the challenge is I'm just thinking about if everybody here listening to this found a way to invest, like, yes, time, yes, giftings, yes, like whatever route, but also resources into where you feel like God's trying to take you. I think about the speaking thing. Some of that, I can't wait to see on the other side of those that invested, yes, that call, but also the long term.
Yeah.
And the money that these people will make and the opportunities that will come because they were willing to pay in a season that maybe they don't have it. Because that's what you realize about like people that are motivational speakers and all of that. They make money off of people that don't have. You don't have health, pay me to teach you how to get healthy.
Yeah.
And I'm not a fan of that mentality, but I'm also learning that I invest because on the other side of my investment, there's going to be a harvest of what I invested in.
Yeah.
Or there should be, at least if you invest in the right way, the right place. And so, man, find something to invest in. Find a person to invest in. Buy somebody's lunch. Like it could be small, simple, but do something for somebody that's going to create a ripple effect for years and years to come. But all of us have something to invest, our time, our treasure, and our talents. And so let's go make some investments.
I would also say, look at what you have and see what you can give away.
It's good. Be generous. All right, y'all. Thanks for tuning in for conversation number 3. We will see y'all on the next one. Peace.